the boss and the maid. Emily stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of her penthouse office. Watching the city lights blur through tears she refused to let fall. Below her, 23 floors down, the woman she loved was walking away for what might be the last time. Rebecca's small figure disappeared into the evening crowd, carrying nothing but a single suitcase and the weight of a love that society told them was wrong. Emily pressed her palm against the cold glass, her wedding ring catching the light, a golden reminder of the life she was expected to live, and the lie she had been living for the past 3 years. In that moment, the successful CEO, who had everything, realized she had lost the only thing that ever truly mattered. It had started 18 months ago when Rebecca first arrived at the Montgomery estate as part of the housekeeping staff. Emily remembered that day with painful clarity. How Rebecca had stood in the marble foyer with her worn shoes and nervous smile, clutching her supply basket like a lifeline. There was something about her, something in the way she moved through the world with quiet grace, that made Emily's carefully constructed walls begin to crack. Rebecca had warm brown eyes that seemed to see through all the expensive suits and corporate armor, straight into the lonely soul beneath. Emily had hired her on the spot, telling herself it was because the house needed proper care while she worked her exhausting hours at Montgomery Industries. She didn't admit, not even to herself, that she had seen something in Rebecca that called to the parts of her she had buried long ago. If you're watching this story and you believe in kindness and second chances, in the courage it takes to follow your heart even when the world tells you not to, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment sharing your thoughts, and subscribe to channel name. Your support means everything and helps us continue sharing stories that matter, stories about real love in all its forms. The first few months were torture disguised as normalcy. Emily would come home from board meetings and corporate acquisitions to find her house transformed. Not just cleaned, but cared for, with fresh flowers in the vases and the scent of lemon polish in the air. Rebecca had a way of being present without being intrusive, of anticipating needs before they were spoken. She would leave Emily's reading glasses on the nightstand, knew exactly how she liked her morning coffee, remembered that she was allergic to lilies. These small acts of attention felt more intimate than anything Emily's husband James had done in years. Their marriage had been a merger more than a union. Two ambitious families combining resources. Two people who respected each other but had never truly connected. James spent most of his time traveling for his own business ventures, and Emily had convinced herself that the emptiness she felt was just the price of success. But Rebecca made her question everything. They began having conversations that stretched beyond the simple exchange of instructions and acknowledgments. Rebecca would be dusting the library, and Emily would find herself drawn there, asking about the book in Rebecca's bag. Discovering they both loved poetry, they would end up talking for hours about Mary Oliver and Adrienne Rich, about words that captured feelings too complex for ordinary speech. Rebecca had grown up poor, had worked 3 jobs to put herself through community college, had dreams of becoming a teacher that had been deferred by the harsh realities of survival. She spoke about life with a raw honesty that Emily had never encountered in her world of calculated conversations and strategic networking. In Rebecca's presence, Emily felt like she could breathe for the first time in years, like she could be the person she had hidden away when she chose ambition over authenticity. The turning point came on a rainy October evening when Emily returned home early, her carefully controlled composure shattered by a devastating business betrayal. Her closest colleague had stolen her proposal and presented it as his own, and the board had sided with him, the golden boy over the woman who had worked twice as hard for half the recognition. Emily had walked into her bedroom and simply broken, the tears she had held back for years finally overwhelming her defenses. Rebecca had heard her crying and had come to check on her. And suddenly Emily was sobbing in the arms of her housekeeper, pouring out all her frustration and loneliness and fear. Rebecca had held her without judgment, had stroked her hair and whispered that she was stronger than she knew, that she deserved better than the scraps of respect they threw her way. When Emily finally pulled back and looked into Rebecca's eyes, something shifted between them. The air felt charged with all the unspoken feelings that had been building for months. Emily's hand moved almost of its own accord to touch Rebecca's face, and Rebecca leaned into the touch with a small gasp that sent shivers through Emily's entire body. They both knew in that moment that they were crossing a line that could never be uncrossed. But neither of them could stop. Their first kiss was gentle and terrifying and absolutely right. Like coming home after a lifetime of being lost. Emily felt tears streaming down her face as she kissed Rebecca, mourning all the years she had wasted denying this part of herself, celebrating the miracle of finally being seen and wanted for who she truly was. What followed were 6 months of stolen moments and secret love, a double life that left Emily torn between joy and guilt. They would find ways to be together. Early mornings before James came home from his trips, late nights in the guest house that had become their sanctuary. Rebecca would touch her in ways that made her feel cherished rather than possessed, would look at her like she was something precious rather than something owned. They would lie tangled in sheets talking about everything and nothing, building a world that existed only in the spaces between Emily's public life. Rebecca brought color back into Emily's gray existence, made her laugh with stupid jokes and cry with tender poetry, reminded her that life was meant to be felt deeply, rather than just endured strategically. But the weight of the secret grew heavier with each passing day. Emily watched Rebecca transform in their private moments, saw the light in her eyes and the freedom in her movements, only to watch her retreat back into the role of invisible servant when anyone else was around. It was breaking Rebecca slowly, forcing her to hide the most important relationship of her life, to pretend she was nothing, more than hired help to the woman she loved with her whole heart. Emily could see the toll it was taking, could feel Rebecca withdrawing even as she held her, could sense that they were approaching a crisis point. James had started making noises about wanting to start a family, about Emily scaling back her work to focus on being a wife and mother. The cage was closing in, and Emily was suffocating under the weight of expectations and appearances. The breaking point came 3 weeks ago at a charity gala where Emily's family had introduced her to several prominent families with eligible sons, still pushing their agenda even though she was married. Emily had smiled and made polite conversation while dying inside, while Rebecca waited at home probably wondering if she was just a phase, just something Emily was experimenting with before returning to her predetermined life. When Emily finally got home that night, she had found Rebecca packing her things. Rebecca had looked at her, with eyes full of pain, and said that she couldn't do this anymore, couldn't be the secret shame that Emily kept hidden from the world, couldn't love someone who valued reputation more than truth. She had told Emily that she deserved more than stolen moments and whispered conversations, that she wanted a life where love didn't have to hide in shadows. Emily had begged her to stay, had promised that things would change, but Rebecca had shaken her head sadly and said that promises meant nothing without action. She had given Emily an ultimatum, not as manipulation but as survival. She needed to know if Emily would ever have the courage to choose love over convenience, to choose authentic happiness over approved misery. She had packed her bags and left, telling Emily to call her only if she was ready to live honestly, ready to stop pretending to be someone she wasn't. That had been 3 weeks of agony, 3 weeks of Emily trying to convince herself that she could go back to her old life, that she could forget Rebecca and rebuild the walls that had kept her safe if not happy. But she couldn't. Every morning she woke up reaching for Rebecca and finding only emptiness. Every night she came home to a house that felt like a mausoleum, perfectly maintained by the new housekeeping service but completely devoid of warmth. James had noticed her distraction and had attributed it to work stress, had suggested she see a therapist or take a vacation, never suspecting that his wife's heart belonged to someone else entirely. Emily had gone through the motions of her life feeling like a ghost, wondering how she had ended up so hollow, so disconnected from any real joy or purpose. She had built an empire but lost her soul, had achieved everything her family wanted while abandoning everything she needed. Tonight, standing at her office window watching Rebecca walk away, possibly forever, Emily finally understood what she had to do. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. She was 42 years old, and she had spent her entire life being what other people needed her to be. Dutiful daughter, ambitious executive, appropriate wife. She had sacrificed her truth on the altar of expectation and called it success. But what was success without authenticity? What was achievement without love? What was a life lived for others' approval if it meant dying inside every single day? She thought about Rebecca's courage, about how this woman who had so much less in Material terms had so much more in authenticity and bravery. Rebecca had been willing to walk away from love rather than accept the crumbs Emily was offering, had valued her own dignity enough to demand more. Emily grabbed her phone with shaking hands and called her lawyer. She scheduled meetings for the next morning, divorce proceedings, and corporate restructuring, and all the complicated logistics of dismantling a life built on lies. She called her parents and told them in a voice that trembled but didn't break that she was done living according to their script, that she was grateful for everything they had given her, but she was choosing a different path now. Her mother's shocked silence and her father's angry protests rolled over her like water off stone. She felt fear, yes, but underneath it was a growing sense of liberation, of rightness, of finally aligning her actions with her heart. Then she ran. She literally ran out of her office, ignoring her assistant's surprised calls, racing to the parking garage and driving through the city streets with her heart pounding like thunder. She knew where Rebecca was staying, a modest apartment across town that was all she could afford on a housekeeper's salary. Emily double-parked and ran up 3 flights of stairs, arriving breathless at Rebecca's door. She knocked, and when Rebecca opened it with surprise and hope and fear all mixed in her expression, Emily didn't say anything. She just kissed her, right there in the hallway where neighbors could see. Kissed her like she should have done months ago in front of everyone who mattered. She kissed her like an apology and a promise and a declaration all at once. When they finally broke apart, both crying and laughing, Emily took Rebecca's hands in hers and said everything she should have said before. She told Rebecca that she had filed for divorce, that she was restructuring her company to promote more women to leadership positions, that she was prepared to lose everything and everyone who couldn't accept who she really was. She told Rebecca that she wanted a life together, not a secret affair but a real life, with holding hands in public and introducing each other as partners and building something genuine and true. She told Rebecca that she loved her, not despite the complications but because Rebecca had shown her what love actually meant, what it meant to be seen and valued and cherished for your authentic self. Rebecca had looked at her for a long moment, searching her face for any sign of doubt or hesitation, and then she had smiled through her tears and pulled Emily inside, closing the door on the old life and opening it on something new and terrifying and beautiful. They held each other in that small apartment that felt more like home than Emily's mansion ever had, and they began planning a future that would undoubtedly be difficult, but would be theirs and theirs alone. Emily knew that the road ahead would be hard, that she would face judgment and loss and probably financial consequences. Her family might disown her. Society friends would gossip. Business associates would question her judgment. But none of that mattered anymore because she had finally chosen herself, had finally chosen love over fear. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of the courage it takes to live authentically, if it made you believe in the power of love to transform and liberate, please show your support by liking this video and leaving a comment below. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it, someone who is struggling to be themselves in a world that demands conformity. The last thing Emily had done before leaving her office that night was to remove her wedding ring and leave it on her desk alongside her resignation from the life she had been performing. She had walked out of that building as herself, finally and completely herself, ready to face whatever came next with Rebecca by her side. They had kissed in that hallway like it was the first time and the last time and every time in between, 2 women who had found each other against all odds and chosen love despite all obstacles. Emily had spent her whole life climbing ladders that led nowhere, achieving victories that felt hollow, impressing people whose opinions didn't matter. But in Rebecca's arms, in that small apartment with its second-hand furniture and genuine warmth, she had finally found what she had been searching for all along. Please comment below and tell us, have you ever had to choose between living your truth and meeting others' expectations? Your story might inspire someone else who is struggling with the same choice right now. Emily and Rebecca's story was just beginning, but it was already more real and more valuable than anything Emily had experienced in her 42 years. They would face challenges, certainly, but they would face them together, honestly, courageously, authentically, and that made all the difference. Because in the end, The only life worth living is the one where you get to be yourself, where you get to love who you love without shame or hiding, where you get to build something true even if it cost you everything that was false. Emily had learned that lesson almost too late, but not quite. She had learned it in time to save herself, in time to save their love, in time to finally start living instead of just existing. And as she lay beside Rebecca that night, feeling more at peace than she had in years, she knew with absolute certainty that she had made the right choice. Love, after all, was always the right choice, always.